Yeah, stay prepared for the up and downs. Life is like a seesaw. Some say it's a bitch, man. I couldn't.
What's going on, guys? This is Justin, the Critic. We're back with another episode. We have Week 4 predictions on the table. We're going to be talking about those here in a second. But yeah, the matchups that I'll be covering, in my opinion, are going to play a big part in the college football playoff picture. I know it's still very early, but with college football, as we know, on a week-to-week basis, if you lose one game, you're pretty much putting yourself outside of that picture. So in these 4 matchups, I think all of them are going to play a significant part in who we see at the end of the year. And of course, you guys probably already have an idea of what teams I'll be talking about. First matchup that I do want to cover starts in the Pac-12, and that game will be on Friday. Utah taking on USC in USC, so that's going to be a home game for the Trojans. And Utah coming off a win versus NIU, then going and beating Idaho State, a FCS team, 31-0. Based on what I've seen, Utah is looking really strong in the run game. I still haven't seen a lot from Tyler Huntley, the quarterback. And so he's still the biggest question mark for me. Zach Moss is an absolute beast. Defense has been taking care of business, winning at the line of scrimmage, and overall just holding their opponents to under, averaging double digits. So roughly 7 or 8 points a game average that the defense is allowing right now. So they're doing a really good job, but they haven't really played anyone yet. Okay? You guys may disagree, but obviously they started with BYU. BYU with that win against USC just this past week probably makes them look a lot better than they actually are. And then they took on NIU. They struggled early on, but figured it out. Eventually pulled away in the second half, won 35-17, and then beat up on Idaho State, a FCS opponent, 31-0. So with these wins, based on what I've seen, they haven't been as dominant. They haven't looked like a top 10 type team to me at this point. Not that they can't be that, right? I'm just saying so far from what I've seen, they haven't looked like that dominant opponent that you're scared to see on Saturdays. And so with that being said, USC being at home, coming off a loss versus BYU, true freshman Caden Slovis struggled big time in that BYU game. That was my only big question going into the game, because it was going to be his first true away game. What would he play like, right? What would we see from him? Would he be able to do what he did against Stanford? So it's just very different when you're playing away from home. And one of my big friends that's a huge SC fan, he also mentioned to me that SC only went to they came to Utah on a Friday evening, so around 5 o'clock, sometime around that time. But the thing is, Utah, there's a difference in elevation, right? And so if you've ever traveled and gone to a different state to play sports or had to play in a higher elevation, I've personally had to do that myself, so I know there is an adjustment period. And so if you don't take the time to get your players acclimated, it's going to play a big role in how much you're getting from your players, right? Because even just jogging and then you're going to full-on sprinting at a higher altitude, you can just feel it in your lungs immediately, a burn. But, I don't know if that was a factor. They played really well overall, but eventually, if you heard the commentators, as the game went along, they talked a lot about how USC had been looking sluggish on the field. So I can't say for sure if that's something that played into their loss versus BYU, but I do know for sure that's certainly something that will play into how well you're going to be able to, how well and how long you're going to be able to run at a high level when you're playing any sport. So with that being said, USC being back at home, I really love them playing at home. I think they're hard to beat at home, regardless of who's on the roster. Caden Slovis is going to get another chance to prove himself versus who some people are calling the Pac-12 champ in Utah. And I really like this USC defense still very young, a lot of sophomores and freshmen, but I think they have the potential to be a great unit. Got a lot of speed on that side of the ball. They weren't able to contain BYU because of Zach Wilson's ability to scramble, and that was another thing that I thought would play a big factor into the outcome of the game. But yeah, USC being at home, very young defense, Caden Slovis being back in his comfort zone, Utah seeing their first real opponent of the season. I think this game has the making of an upset, and I think they're just going to key in on Zach Moss, try to do their best to stack the box and force Tyler Huntley to win this game with his arm, which he hasn't been forced to do at all this year. I think this game is going to be one of those games where Utah is going to be caught up to speed, right, with the level of competition. Because they've only seen cupcakes early on in the year, they're going to see USC now, and USC is already acclimated to playing at a higher, a faster level of play because they played Stanford, because they've played, I wouldn't necessarily just say BYU, but when you play a Power 5 team like Stanford, even though Stanford isn't the Stanford we've seen in past years, they are a Power 5 opponent, and they play fast. They just came off of a win versus Northwestern, and so I think in that case, USC is already acclimated to playing at a faster pace, and so I think that's going to play a big role in putting them in a good position to win this game. I actually have USC winning this. The crazy thing is USC has a 4-game winning streak at home versus Utah. So the last 4 times that they've played Utah at home, they have won. My final score in this game, USC 31, Utah 27. Once again, final USC 31, Utah 27. This is going to be a fun game to watch. It's going to be Friday night. And like I said, look for Utah to get caught up in the speed of play. Moving on to the next matchup, we have Auburn taking on A&M. Both teams have practically been broken in, right? Auburn taking on Oregon, and then we had A&M playing against Clemson. A&M, unfortunately, was not able to do their thing and pull off that upset versus Clemson. Auburn was able to pull off the upset against Oregon. And so from what I've seen from both teams, Auburn, they played Tulane and then they played Kent State. That offense just does not look like it's clicking at a level that it needs to be at right now in order for them to be competing against better opponents in the SEC, such as a team that they're going to see this weekend in A&M. Bo Nix just doesn't look like he's figured it out just yet, right? He's gonna. I personally expected him to catch up a lot quicker than he is, but he just isn't progressing as fast as I thought he would. A lot of what I've seen from them so far is just a whole bunch of read option, RPO type stuff where Bo Nix has actually ran the ball a lot. I didn't see him throw it a lot over the weekend versus opponents, like Kent State or like Tulane. And so, I don't know, maybe they're saving their playbook, right, for this game, and we're just kind of depending on their defense in those matchups. But, they just did a lot of read option quarterback keeps with Bo Nix, brought in Joey Gatewood and did the same thing. And so maybe they're holding back offensively with their playbook to, save it for this A&M game. I don't know, but I'm still not impressed with this Auburn offense. The defense is obviously going to be there, but how long until they break, right? Because you can't keep them on the field forever. They're just going to get tired, and they're not going to be able to play at that same level of play that we've seen from them when they get tired. We saw that against Oregon when Oregon was playing fast pace, quick everything, and moving the ball, hurry up offense. And so I think that's something that we might see from A&M coming into this matchup. A lot of hurry-up play, a lot of speed, a lot of quick outs, a lot of throws into the flats, just getting the ball out very quickly. And so A&M's at home, right? Last year it was Auburn at home, and Auburn won this game 28-24 in a very close one. And so I like what I've seen from A&M's defense, right? They held Travis Etienne to, I believe it was like 15 yards on 16 carries, and they held Trevor in check for the most part. And so I really do think this defense, they aren't really getting as much credit because they haven't played anyone outside of Clemson. So people are looking for consistency from them, and because they lost a good amount of production from a season ago. But the defense has actually played really well. They just came off of a win versus Lamar in a blowout, 66-3. So not much to take away from that game, other than they did what was expected of them. And so the offense, I still believe in Kellen Mond. A&M is just a very good home team. They're hard to beat in College Station, and Kellen Mond always lights it up at home. And so with this game, I think he's going to use his legs a lot. He wasn't able to utilize that as much in the Clemson matchup because he ended up tweaking his calf. And so that is a big part of his game, and I think he's going to utilize that come this Saturday versus Auburn. I have A&M winning at home. My final score, A&M 27, Auburn 20. Once again, final score, Texas A&M 27, Auburn 20. And I think that's going to be a fun matchup either way. Moving along, we go to the Big 12. Texas playing Oklahoma State. Texas will be at home. Crazy thing is Oklahoma State has a 4-game win streak against this Texas program. So is Texas going to be able to find a way to, get over the hump this season? I don't know, right? This game has shootout written all over it. Beginning of the season, Oklahoma State was my sleeper pick to win the Big 12 because I know what they bring to the table offensively. But it's pretty much looking like the same story on the defensive side of the ball. They looked better, in the second half versus Tulsa, posting a shutout in the second half. But we just need to see some consistency from that defense, and I'm not sure that Oklahoma State is going to be the team to get those 1 or 2 stops that are needed in these types of shootouts to win these games, right? Because these are the one-possession type games, the games where the game is decided on who gets the ball last, right? And so Texas looking very good overall. We saw them versus LSU, a very notable defense, and LSU just couldn't stop them. I don't expect Oklahoma State to figure out a way to stifle this offense. Sam Ehlinger has been playing very well. The wide receivers are very good. Biggest question is in this game is going to be who's going to be able to make a stop, right? 1 or 2 stops. And if I had to, pick and choose, I would probably want a more highly recruited team on the defensive side of the ball from Texas, right? Because of the talent that they bring in on that side of the ball. If I had to put my house on it, I'm gonna say that Texas is gonna give me 1 or 2 stops compared to Oklahoma State. Now, of course I'd like to see Oklahoma State, pull off the upset because I have them as my sleeper pick to win the Big 12. But from what I've seen so far, both teams look phenomenal offensively. But Texas has the bigger potential and the bigger upside when it comes to the defensive side of the ball. Of course, we're going to find out if Texas can, get over this hump that Oklahoma State has had over them. And so we'll see what happens. I like Oklahoma State, Tylan Wallace, Chuba Hubbard, and then they got redshirt freshman and Spencer Sanders at quarterback. Super elusive, big arm. He's getting his first start in this season, but he's looked good so far. He still has a lot to improve on. And so I think Texas is going to be able to find something within the film and to make him uncomfortable and force him to do some things that he doesn't normally do. And so for that reason, And for all the reasons I've stated, I have Texas winning at home. My final score is Texas 41, Oklahoma State 38. Once again, final score, Texas 41, Oklahoma State 38. And I think that's going to be a great game, great shootout. Even though I giving you that final score, I wouldn't be surprised if Oklahoma State finds a way to pull this out. It's just a mindset thing at this point, because they know they've won 4 times in a row. Why wouldn't they think that they can make it 5? So with that being said, let's move along to the 4th matchup. We've got Michigan versus Wisconsin. Massive implications in the Big Ten. Ultimately, this is going to decide whether or not Michigan is going to get a CFP spot, right? Which I don't think they will, because of the way their schedule is looking right now and with the way that they've played at this point. Michigan coming off games versus Middle Tennessee State and Army, where they struggled really to find their identity offensively. They just don't look like they've executed Josh Gaddis's playbook very well. They just haven't executed anything very well. Defensively, they've played really good. They haven't played as well as we've seen them in past years. I feel like that defense may have possibly taken a step back when comparing them to the team a season ago. And so Michigan, I'm just not sold on them. I don't think the vast majority of neutral fans are sold on them. Shea Patterson has had a very big problem with holding on to the ball. They just haven't been clicking, right? Michigan they honestly looked better a season ago. They had a better idea of who they were. Right now, they're trying to adjust to a new system, play more spread to make Shea comfortable, but he doesn't even look comfortable playing, running some of the plays that they've drawn up for him. So I don't know what's going on at Michigan. Defense is going to be the big thing that's going to keep them in this game if they are going to be able to stick in this game, because with the way that Wisconsin has been playing, they can pull away from this if Michigan doesn't come to play and doesn't execute early. Of course, Jonathan Taylor, they have a list of guys that you might not know the names of. His name's Jack Cohn. Wide receivers, Danny Davidson. They've got A.J. Taylor. They've got Quintez Cephas. A lot of guys that you're not going to hear about, that you don't know about, simply because of Wisconsin's style of play. But with the way that they've added so much more spread formations and spread sets to their playbook this year, you're going to be hearing their name called not only a lot this season, but expect this unit of wide receivers to be one of the more talked about units on this in this game come Saturday. And so, of course, Wisconsin has seen 2 cupcakes, USF and Central Michigan. I get it, guys. They've shut them out. They've shut both of them out. They haven't played anyone yet, and so we don't want to buy into that hype. But here's the thing. Look at early on in this season. There's a lot of Power 5 teams who played a lot of cupcakes and who did not dominate those matchups versus their cupcakes. So it hasn't been a common thing that we've seen from Power 5 opponents in 2019, where they're just dominating their cupcakes. It's just weird to say that. But just dominating lesser opponents. We've seen multiple Power 5 teams struggle, right, with lesser opponents. And so we've got to credit the teams that are taking care of business. And so Wisconsin has been taking care of business, doing what's expected of them. They look better on both sides of the ball. They might have a quarterback now. I don't want to jump the gun there until we see how he looks versus a Michigan team and a legit opponent in Michigan. And so defense returns a lot of guys that were injured a season ago, a lot of young players who got a lot of experience in games last year, 4 true freshmen specifically. And so a lot of these younger players have experience and are going to draw from that in this game. And it's going to be a great game. It's going to be a really good game. I think a lot of people will be surprised with how well-oiled machine Wisconsin is going to look on Saturday, just on both sides of the ball, because we're just so used to seeing them run heavy, line up in power formations and just run the ball down your throat. Now, they're still going to do that. But they're going to be a much more balanced attack offensively. Defense, we know what they bring to the table. And so it's going to be a great matchup. I just don't see this Michigan team being where they need to be in order to beat a Wisconsin team that's on fire right now and that has arguably the best running back in the country for the moment. And so with all those things being said, Wisconsin playing at home versus Michigan, I don't think they've lost to Michigan at home when they're both ranked in the AP poll. So this is going to be a very good game. I think it's going to be close early on, but I think eventually Wisconsin will pull away because of their dominance at the line of scrimmage and their ability to get to the quarterback. I have Wisconsin winning at home 34-17. Once again, my final score, Wisconsin wins at home 34-17. And the last matchup we'll be talking about, if it isn't obvious enough, Georgia taking on Notre Dame. Georgia playing at home. So far from what we've seen from Georgia, they've played Vanderbilt. They've played a cupcake. I can't seem to remember their name because, we don't really hear from these teams much. And then they just played Arkansas State, who's actually a pretty decent team within their conference. But yeah, they practically blew out everyone that they played, pretty much doing everything that's expected of them. Offensively, they're doing what they do, right? They run the rock. They've got a stable of running backs, 3 different running backs. Zamir White. They've got DeAndre Swift. They've got another guy. I think his last name is Harrion. And some people are calling them the best offensive line in the country. And I would have a hard time arguing with them, right? Because of how much success they're finding on the ground. It's ridiculous. And it's not only because of that O-line, but it's because of the stable of running backs that they have. They don't have a 1-2 punch. They have a 1-2-3 punch. And then they have Jake Fromm right in the pocket. Super poised guy. He's very underrated in his ability as a quarterback. Very smart, takes care of the football, and when he's called into action, he makes plays. He's got a whole new set of wide receivers compared to a season ago, right? Mecole Hardman, Riley Ridley, and then you had, I forget his first name, but his last name is Holloman. So he left the team. And so basically working with a new set of guys that are still very talented, but that's the only thing for me that I haven't seen consistency from in Georgia so far. Maybe they're saving their playbook. Maybe they're just saving a whole bunch of things for this game versus Notre Dame. But he still played very well with these wide receivers, but it hasn't looked as clean as we've seen in past years when he had the guys like Mecole Hardman, Riley Ridley, and Holloman. And so it does look a bit different, but these guys are just as talented. So I expect him to find the same amount of success playing against Notre Dame if he's called upon. But the big issue for Notre Dame right now is their ability to stop the run. They're giving up 230 yards a game. And that was versus Louisville and New Mexico. So you can just imagine giving up 230 yards a game versus those opponents. And then you're going to come and face a Georgia team who's practically averaging roughly 300 yards on the ground per game with much better running backs, much better O-line. Practically they're better in every unit, right? When it comes to the line of scrimmage, when it comes to the skilled positions, when it comes to the guys on defense, everything about this team is better than the opponents that they've played. And they've allowed 230 yards a game versus New Mexico and versus Louisville. I repeat. And so this will be a game where we're going to get our questions answered, right? I'm super hyped up on this Georgia juice right now because we've seen consistency from them in the past, so we know that they're a legit team. Notre Dame, on the other hand, whenever they've seen bigger primetime games, more specifically whenever they've gone to the playoff or a national championship, they've just gotten obliterated, right? So it's hard for us to expect them to bring the goods to these types of games based on what we've seen from them in the past. At the same time, Georgia is averaging, around 300 yards a game through the air. Notre Dame, they're rushing for about 200 yards a game, 300 yards through the air. But Ian Book, I'm just not sold on Ian Book at all. I don't think you guys are either. From what we've seen from him in the matchup versus Louisville, he did not look good at all. He looked indecisive. He looked like a freshman quarterback on there in that game who just wanted to leave the pocket. He looked like he wanted to leave the pocket. He didn't look comfortable, and he has some of the best O-line in the nation. When his guys were open, he was missing them in stride. Just very inaccurate balls, right? Just stuff that really you should be hitting, regardless of whether you're elite or not. Simple throws in stride. He just looks like he wants to leave the pocket and scramble. And so I don't think he's going to find success in the pass game or scrambling, because what I already know from Georgia, they have one of the best secondaries in the nation, and they always bring in phenomenal linebackers. So I expect to see those wide receivers from Notre Dame locked up, and once Ian Book tries to scramble, I expect that Georgia's going to have a spy for him. And so their only hope at this point, in my opinion, this is just my opinion, is that Notre Dame has to try and dominate at the line of scrimmage with their O-line, be physical, slow this game down, keep control, basically a time of possession type of game plan where they control the clock, eat up the clock, and make this a gritty type game. And if they're not able to do that, I'm not sure where their production is going to come from. I'm sure they're going to make, they're going to score points early on, but that's just like part of the break-in period, in my opinion, where you're kind of just figuring out what you're up against. And so we'll see what happens, right? Even though I'm super hyped up on this Georgia juice, I don't know what we're going to see from them, right? This is going to be Georgia's first, I guess, legit opponent. They did play an in-conference opponent in Vanderbilt, but Vandy is not looking as good as they have in past years based on what we've seen from them so far in the season. And so Georgia taking on Notre Dame. We're going to get a lot of questions answered from both sides. But really, I think Georgia, based on how they're looking early on in this season, what we've seen from them in the past, they play big in big games. And so I've got Georgia winning this game, right? Final score at home, Georgia wins 41-23. Final score, Georgia 41, Notre Dame 23. And so pretty much said everything I wanted to say. The Notre Dame defense was much better a year ago. They did lose about 5 guys on that side of the ball. And overall, man, I just think Georgia is better in every phase of the game. And if you put everything side by side, coaching staff, running backs, quarterbacks, O-line, you're pretty much going to have the advantage for Georgia in almost every unit. And so for those reasons and for the reasons I've listed, I have Georgia winning 41-23. Notable games to keep an eye on. We have LSU taking on Vanderbilt. LSU should take care of business, but these are always just one of those weird trap games. And so it's just, kind of iffy, but they should take care of business, right? With the way we've seen the offense play, with the speed that LSU brings to the table on defense, and Vanderbilt just hasn't looked good at all playing so far. And so with that, We also have Cal taking on Ole Miss. Great, super fun out-of-conference game where we get to see the Pac-12 take on an SEC opponent. Given Ole Miss is one of the, bottom feeders of the SEC at this point, they have looked very good on defense, and I think this is going to be a very low-scoring game, especially with what Cal brings to the table on defense. But yeah, I'm not too sure who's going to pull this one out, right? Because Ole Miss, Cal, we still don't know what these teams are. Cal just came off of an upset over Washington, then struggled with the North Texas team, who is pretty good offensively, but I just don't see these teams bringing enough to the table offensively to really say who's going to win. But I still think it's going to be a fun defensive matchup, low scoring, and we're going to find out more from these teams. And, of course, whoever wins this game, a lot of crap is going to be talked about whose conference is better. So I think both teams are playing for their conference and to put some respect on their conference name. And so we'll see who can do it. We'll see who can pull it out. Then we have Michigan State taking on Northwestern. This is going to be another very low-scoring game because both teams can't seem to find any offense. Of course, Northwestern has pretty much a whole set of brand new guys offensively, new quarterback, new running backs, just new, right? And Northwestern is a very gritty team. Michigan State, very similar, very strong defensively. This game might be come down to a single-digit type final, right? Could even be like a 6-3 final, a 10-7 final. That's what I expect from this game. Michigan State, man, I just don't know what the hell is going on over there. If you heard me on my takeaways, I have no idea how they lost to that ASU team, how they just can't seem to find and get anything going offensively. It's just crazy because they're another one of the Michigan teams that comes into the season with hype, right, on a consistent basis. And yet again, disappointed. So we'll see. Like I said, this is just going to be another low-scoring affair. And I don't think either of these teams are going to compete in the Big Ten for much. But right there, they're always going to put everyone on upset alert in conference play whenever playing at home and whatnot. So another low-scoring affair. The next game I wanted to talk about, UCF taking on Pitt. Pitt being at home after coming off a close loss to Penn State. UCF coming off an absolute monster game versus Stanford where they obliterated them in the first half, pretty much took their foot off the gas in the second and won comfortably 45-27. I think this is a trap game for UCF coming in this game super high. Pitt coming into this game knowing what's at stake for UCF. And, whenever someone plays an undefeated opponent, they always want to be that first loss on that record, right? And so Pitt, not necessarily the most explosive team, but they still have the ability to, to put some points on you if you don't stay disciplined and key in on those matchups. But other than that, I mean, UCF beat these guys comfortably a season ago. I think the final was like 45-14 or something, 41-14. So they blew Pitt out a season ago, and but I don't think that's going to be the case this year. So keep an eye out for this game. I think it might be close early, and I do think Pitt can pull them into deep waters. So we'll see. If UCF blows them out, hey, it is what it is. But that's how I feel at the moment. Another game to look out for, South Carolina taking on Mizzou. South Carolina looking much better as the season's gone along, especially coming off that loss versus UNC. And quarterback play has been phenomenal since inserting Ryan Helinski. He's looked really good, really mature for a true freshman. And overall, South Carolina has looked very impressive on both sides of the ball, especially coming off that game versus Alabama. But whenever you play Alabama, right, you're going to get a Super Bowl effort from whoever that team is. And so are we going to see that same South Carolina team on a consistent basis, on a week-to-week basis? We're going to find out. They're going to be taking on Mizzou, Kelly Bryant, who's been on fire after that loss to Wyoming. Seems like they've figured things out, cleaned up a lot of issues, and they've looked very dominant in their past few matchups versus West Virginia, as well as versus another FCS opponent. So we'll see who can bring the goods come Saturday, and we're going to find out who's for real. And so with that, the last notable game I wanted to touch on was Oregon taking on Stanford. I do think Oregon should blow out Stanford because of their high-powered offense with, of course, Justin Herbert, and what Stanford is just lacking right now. Their inability to stop people in the pass game, which is going to eventually open up the run game for Oregon because, they're going to be sitting maybe 6 or 7 in coverage, which is going to open up that box, check the play, and there you go. You got a few zone reads. But with that being said, the Oregon defense has been playing very well this season versus Auburn, versus Nevada, versus Montana. I get it. They've seen lesser opponents, but from what we've seen from them, they've been dominant. Stanford, on the other hand, haven't been the same. Since, KJ Costello got hurt, they lost a lot of production this past offseason with guys graduating, guys going to the draft and whatnot. And so that was a big deal for me whenever I've spoke about them in my predictions or in the preseason, is just how much production they've lost. They pretty much, KJ Costello is looking to put the ball in his tight end's hands, right? He loves throwing to big targets, putting up 50-50 balls, and so I expect to see a lot of that on Saturday, but I've got Oregon winning this game comfortably. So we'll see what happens. Pac-12 play, and with the way Oregon needs to play, they need to blow everyone out on a week-to-week basis, right? If they're going to put their name in that college football playoff conversation, it's going to be hard, obviously, with the loss to Auburn. But if they're wanting to, continue to fight for that, they're going to have to blow every single opponent out. And so we're going to find out if they still want it, if they still want that spot. And so we'll see on Saturday. Teams I have on upset alert, right? Upset alert. Last week I had Georgia Southern versus Minnesota. Minnesota pulled that one out of their asses literally on the last play of the game. And then I had Furman taking on Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech barely escaped that. The final score was 24-17. Crazy. And then my last pick was Nebraska versus NIU, which didn't end up being an upset alert at all. It's all good. But my upset alert picks for this week, I have SMU versus TCU. SMU, they haven't really played anybody yet, right? But neither has TCU. TCU took on Purdue, so people might say, hey, well, they played Purdue. Purdue is not very good. They're missing their quarterback, Elijah Sindelar, who was throwing for roughly 500 yards a game. So you take him out of the picture, there goes practically 80% of your production. And so they beat a Purdue team that wasn't whole. So we'll see what we get from TCU, but SMU has looked very good offensively, has played well enough defensively, and the quarterback, Boucher, former quarterback at Texas, he's taken over and he's playing very well. And of course, whenever you get a chance to play Power 5 opponents, you're going to bring your best. And so I think TCU will be tested in this game. SMU will put them on upset alert. So that's my first pick for the weekend. Second pick, I have Appalachian State taking on UNC, North Carolina. North Carolina coming off a loss versus Wake Forest. Didn't look good at all in the second half. Came together in the fourth quarter. But if they're going to be winning ball games, of course, you got to play 4 quarters, baby. And we didn't see that from UNC in consistent games this season, right? It's kind of been a fourth quarter. They've kind of been pulling everything out in the fourth quarter. And so Appalachia State, man, they're always putting people on upset alert. That's what they do. That's part of their brand as a a football program. And so I don't see this being any different. Appalachia State puts UNC on upset alert. Moving on, at the third matchup, we have Florida taking on Tennessee. I believe Florida is at home. I get it. Tennessee has been very bad. But Florida hasn't been much better, right? Florida struggled versus Miami, which isn't looking that great as the season continues along. Florida struggled against Kentucky after Kentucky lost their quarterback. I get it. Then Florida lost their quarterback. Here's what I'm high on. I'm high on the Florida defense, and I'm high on the Florida players at the skilled positions. But after coming off a close win versus Kentucky, now they have a new starting quarterback. We're not sure what we're going to see from him on Saturday. I don't necessarily think Tennessee is, amazing, and that's why they're going to put them on upset alert. I just see this as a trap game. It's just wrong place, wrong time type of thing. But hey, Florida could go out there and absolutely obliterate this team. But I just think with the momentum Tennessee's coming into this game with, coming off a blowout win over, a very weak opponent, of course that's going to give their team confidence. And like I said, I don't think Tennessee is amazing. I just think this game, the timing of it, and how it's, right after the Kentucky game, right after Tennessee just came off a blowout, I think this could make for a very interesting matchup, especially with a new quarterback running the show at Florida. So we'll see what happens. We'll let it play out. And so guys, those are my predictions for week 4. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Or if you're listening to this on YouTube, drop a comment, whether it's Instagram, wherever you're listening to this, drop a comment. Always good to have outside thoughts and opinions. But yeah, guys, with that being said, I always appreciate you for supporting the podcast. And regardless of what platform you're on, if you're enjoying the podcast, if you're getting value from the podcast, please go ahead and bookmark it, star it, or subscribe. Like I said, just depending on what platform you're using, that always helps in keeping the show running, keeping the podcast running. But yeah, all those links are in the description if you're wanting to listen to my podcast on a certain platform or find me on social media. All those links are in the description. Again, all that being said, hope you guys have a great day, evening, or night, wherever you are. This is Just Another Critic signing off. Peace.
Yeah, stay prepared for the up and downs. Life is like a seesaw. Some say it's a bitch, man. I couldn't agree more. 1 minute you're on top, then you're in the heat.